Outside the Office, Mobile Security was a live webinar that was originally produced on Thursday, February 9th, 2017. The presenters for this presentation were David Hammerberg and Tyler Wanger, both with McConley and Asbury. Enjoy this webinar recap and visit us online at www.macpas.com for more information about our future events. We have some really good content put together for today's webinar. I'm really excited to share with you guys and to have Dave here with us. Dave is the IT director here at McConley and Asbury, and he's got a plethora of experience working with a lot of the technologies that we're going to go over. He's a CPA. He's got a bunch of other certifications within Microsoft and other consulting certifications. And so, again, Dave has a lot of experience, and I'm eager to hear his perspective as he'll kind of be talking today from the organizational standpoint and how the organization can make sure that they're protected in today's remote and mobile society. So, Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So with that, we are going to just quickly go over today's objective.
What a great topic for today, Tyler. I would have to guess, with the few inches of snow we received this morning, that there's probably more remote users in central PA than any other day in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a day like today, students might be off school with the snow. You have other businesses who might be on a delay or have off. And yeah, like you said, today's a perfect day to go over this webinar, as you know, many users who are joining us today might be working remotely from a home location or something and didn't go into the office.
So we basically have two classes of remote users there. Users that are usually remote or mostly remote, and then we have users that, once or twice or three times a year are remote for a snowstorm or some other kind of storm or a family emergency. The organization's job and employees' responsibility is to make sure that remote access is secure. So it's a tough job for both the organization and the employee.
Yeah, and for the employee, we live in such a mobile society with smartphones, tablets, laptops. The employee is consistently on those mobile devices, so hopefully we can do our best to shed some light on how they can be more secure in the different things that they do. So as you guys see this slide, this is kind of the core mission or objective that we're hoping that you guys can take away from this webinar, is that you'll be able to better understand mobile technologies, the threats that exist, how to avoid them, but also understanding your role, because you guys are the users that are using these mobile technologies. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And again, Dave will be providing more of the organizational mindset, where I'll be looking at more of, hey, I'm a personal user using my iPhone, using my Android device, my tablet, or my personal laptop, and how can I make sure that I stay secure without having maybe an organization to assist in that protection. So why is all of this important? Why do we have people that request us to do a mobile technology webinar? I think the biggest thing is that users are spending more time, they're using more devices, and they're doing more things while accessing more and more data each and every day, and we're doing this more than ever before. And I think if you would ask anyone, nobody would see this stopping anytime soon. I think for the foreseeable future, this will continue to be the trend. So marketers and developers are pouring more and more money into advertising, into the development of these products, and that's why you see companies like Apple and Google consistently ranked as the most valuable companies in the world. And from an attacker standpoint, if there's all this money being poured into the development and marketing of these products, they're going to be in that avenue as well, as they're trying to make money for themselves, and the money is there to be had, so they're definitely going to be playing in this space. But again, the biggest thing is data. So we have passwords, we have usernames, we have social security numbers, we have employee identification numbers, our address, our phone number, our credit card number, bank account number. All this data can reside within a smartphone or within a laptop or a tablet, and how are we going to protect that? So that's why all of this is important, is we want to be able to protect our information and keep this secure so that it stays out of the wrong hands and stays in our hands. So, if an organization isn't aware of this mobile and remote trend, I think they can be missing out, and I think that they need to be well aware of the changes that are constantly happening within our society.
From an organization's standpoint, this slide pretty much says, it takes two to tango, right? So organizations can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on hardware, software. They can have all the special equipment they want, but without employee-focused security awareness training, that equipment really is meaningless. I mean, if an employee is not doesn't have the awareness to not click on a phishing link or not click on a web link or something of that nature, the organization's security is going to fail. So again, here we got to make sure that it takes two to make security for the mobile user work. We're going to jump into the agenda right here. Overview of smartphones, understanding of the mobile technologies that are being used by small, medium-sized organizations, the increased risk of mobile technology. What's your mobility strategy? Do you have a bring your own device policy? And then practical steps and real questions in the mobile world. Mobile technology. And this lists a couple devices, but as everyone knows, devices are coming out all the time. Most of your employees, if not all of them, are going to have smartphones. Most of them are going to have tablets, laptops. We have watches. And then on the bottom here, we have bring your own device. That should be a policy that you have that governs what devices you allow on your network that the employees can work on. It should define how that you're going to secure those different mobile technologies. So again, this isn't a comprehensive list, but it's just an example of the technologies that are out there, and they're going to continue to increase. We looked at 10 years ago, we would say, hey, you should have a BYOD policy because this is coming. Well, the ship sort of has sailed on this, and if you don't have a BYOD policy, you need to create one, and you're sort of, well, we'll get into it a little bit further down the line here in our slides, but you really have to analyze what your employees are doing now and then bring that into a current policy.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, you obviously mentioned this isn't a comprehensive list, obviously because it's constantly changing. 20 years ago, if you would have told someone that they can have a supercomputer as part of their phone, they wouldn't have believed you. 10 years ago, if you would have told someone that this supercomputer and phone capabilities are going to be on your watch, they wouldn't have believed you. The technology landscape is continually evolving, and I know there's certain athletic apparel companies like Under Armour who are investing in wearable technology. So maybe 5 years from now you'll have a shirt that you put on and you can see your heart rate, your caloric intake. You can your text will all come right there. So again, this landscape is constantly changing. So we're going to do our best to cover what we view as the current state of mobile technology. But again, this landscape is constantly changing, and from an organizational perspective, it's something to try and stay on top of.
That's a great point, Tyler. I mean, the BYOD policy is a policy that's going to be ever changing. At a minimum, quarterly, you're going to have to look at that policy and update it, as opposed to another policy that might be a little bit more stagnant. So it's a good point that it's always changing. An employee is always going to bring another device and say, "Can I connect it?" And at that point, you got to figure out from a security standpoint: are you going to allow it? Is it going to benefit the organization, et cetera?
Yeah, so as you guys can see here, we have a polling question up there for you, just kind of trying to get an idea of how many hours those of you who are joining our call today are on their mobile devices. So we're going to give you a second to submit those answers. But the next slide that we're going to jump into when you guys are done filling that out is we're going to look at some smartphone statistics. And some of these were kind of staggering to me, but I think they're really important as we highlight these before we go through today's webinar. So before we do that, we'll just share the results here. So as you can see, it says looks around 43% of you around 1 to 2 hours per day. I think I would probably fall in the 2 to 4 hour range. But as you can see, I mean, the large, almost 90% of everyone attending today is more than 1 hour on our mobile devices. So this is something that we're doing a lot of, and that is constantly being a part of our lives. So let's look at some of these statistics. So the first one, research estimates that by 2020 there's going to be 6 billion smartphone users. So I think this is important, especially, again, looking from an attacker's perspective. is there's plenty of opportunities for them to work in this space, to use ransomware, malware, or a phishing attempt to work. So I think it is just important to understand that this is something that exists and it's continually growing. Looking at the second stat there, 50% of smartphone users grab their smartphone immediately after waking up. I know I am one of them. I actually was kind of surprised it was this low. But again, these devices are around us 24/7. We're constantly using them. We're calling on them. We're streaming music on them. And really, they never leave our side. So looking at the attacker's perspective, there again is a lot of opportunity for them. I think this number is extremely important. 84% of mobile users use their same device for both business and personal use. So again, as Dave talks to us today from the organizational perspective, our organizations, do they have a policy in place, a strategy in place to prevent attacks from happening via a device that a user brings for personal use into the business setting? Again, the next stat was extremely staggering, is that mobile email opens have grown by 180% in just the past 3 years. So, Dave is a big proponent of social security awareness and social engineering. So seeing this as emails are constantly being opened on mobile phones, we need to be prepared for those attacks and those phishing emails that could trick a user into clicking on a bad link. And finally, this stat about $100 billion in digital ad money spent for mobile devices. I think this is important because, again, there's a lot of money in here. There's a lot of money to be had, a lot of money that's being exchanged between companies and users, and we're purchasing and we're buying, that attackers are going to try and finagle their way in there to be able to enter the space and trick users into spending money on something that they are actually not. So let's take a look now at smartphones and some statistics, not statistics about them, but let's just discuss them a little bit more. So this is also for tablets as they run similar operating systems. So smartphones now, they are supercomputers. They're all-in-one devices. When you think about sending a text message, using it as a GPS, nowadays you can use it to control the temperature and lighting in your house. You can edit videos on them, scan documents. You can deposit checks with them, and even now with near-field technology, you're able to use them as a credit card via a solution like Apple Pay, and the list goes on and on. Obviously, we don't have time just to go over all that. So that makes the security for these devices extremely, extremely important. Again, they have limitless mobility. We use these devices at work. We plug them into our car. When we're in bed, we're looking at them. When we're on the toilet, we're looking at them. You're at a concert, you see everybody, they have their phone out. They're taking a picture or taking a video. So there's physically no limit to where we can take these devices because, again, they're by our sides all the time, and that makes physical security a challenge and something that we need to be aware of. When we look at operating systems, there's 3 main operating systems that kind of control the landscape: Apple, Android, and Windows, with Apple and Android dominating about 90% of that marketplace. So we'll touch on Apple and Android operating systems here in a little bit, but again, unique operating systems, so those contain different challenges for someone who's using an Android device versus someone who's using an Apple device. Mobile fragmentation is extremely important when we're talking about security and mobile devices. What mobile fragmentation is, it's basically when different mobile users are running older versions of an operating system on the same phone. So if we look at this slide here on the right side, we can see that this is a major issue for Android and less of an issue for Apple, and we'll again discuss that coming up here in a little bit. But from that graphic, Marshmallow, which was Android's latest operating system at the time of this publication, which was June 2016, didn't even have a quarter of its users on the most up-to-date operating system. Whereas you look at Apple in June of 2016, almost 90% of its users were on the latest version of iOS 9. So this is important. Again, these companies release patches and updates to their operating systems mainly for features and usability for its users, but another main factor is for security patches of security threats that they're aware of. So it's extremely important for users, and again, specifically in the Android space, to stay up to date with their operating system. And then finally, looking at smartphones, there's different ways that they could be susceptible to attacks, whether it's via an app that they download, whether it's via a website that they go to, an email link they click on, or what is more commonly with mobile devices is an SMS or a text message-based attack. So now we're going to take a deeper dive into the two big players in the smartphone and tablet industry in Apple and Android. So the main difference is Apple controls the entire ecosystem of their mobile culture. So they own the software, they own the hardware, and they own the firmware. Whereas Android, they have an open source, an open approach to be more customizable for developers, for marketers, for coders, people who want to adapt and change their phone, which, while it's great maybe from the user perspective, does create a lot of more security concerns as there's a lot more lack of control versus Apple. Apple's, they are less customizable. For any of you who have iPhones, you certainly know this, but they are certainly more secure. And one of the main reasons they're more secure is because of app transport security. And what app transport security, or ATS, is it's a feature that Apple debuted in iOS 9. And basically, if anybody knows what the difference is between HTTP and HTTPS, essentially the S stands for secure. So this is a connection that the app makes to the mobile user's device that is secure. So Apple actually originally last year had a mandate that by January 1st of 2017 of this year, all apps within the Apple iTunes Store were required to be in compliance with ATS, that all their data would be secure. They have since bumped that back, and they have not announced a new compliance date, but it is still ongoing. But this is an important feature for users to be aware of, as when you're on an app, how do you know that the data you're sending is secure? It's much more difficult to know that via an app versus a web browser where you can see, hey, I'm connected to HTTP versus being connected to HTTPS. So that is one of the main factors that helps make Apple more secure. But again, they control everything. The hardware's theirs, the software's theirs, and they have a lot more control over what's going on. Whereas Android, again, a lot more customizable, but a lot more open and susceptible to different attacks. And mobile analyst Zoomerlay, as you can see there at the bottom, quoted for saying that, especially for organizations or enterprises, that they view iOS or Apple as the more secure platform. But with that said, it only takes one iOS malware to do as much damage to Apple's ecosystem as thousands of different copycats of Android threats. So while Apple may be a little more or a lot more secure, they could easily be taken down with one well-timed iOS malware attack, where Android, the attacks or the threats are maybe more broad, but maybe not quite as deep.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Tyler. I would think, in an organization that I was IT director of, I would want a more secure device, something that I could really trust the encryption. And we all know with Apple and the lawsuits that were put on them for, wanting to break the encryption, that is a pretty tough encryption, and it would be very hard to break. In most medium-sized organizations, that there's comfort in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously the case was well documented with the FBI and Apple. But yeah, I mean, they stood their ground and they stood by security, which I think kind of showed who they are and what they were about, which, again, from an organizational perspective, is extremely important. Alrighty, so now just to go over some really quick tips for smartphone security, and again, this would also apply to tablets, but it's important to use a PIN or a password. Again, physical security is important. This device is constantly on you. If you would happen to lose this device without a PIN or a password, whoever comes across this device or has stolen it would easily be able to get into it, since there's no security there. Dave, do you have any recommendations on how long the PIN or password should be? A 4-digit code, 6-digit, or something else?
A tough thing with security is making sure that people use it correctly. And sometimes if you burden an employee with too much security, you end up having a password underneath the keyboard, or you have a PIN number on the back of a smartphone. So at some point, we have to make sure that, of course, if we had a 85-digit PIN number, it would be a lot more secure. But at the same point, you may not make it to your car at night. I think most people use a 4-digit PIN. I think a 6-digit PIN would be even better. But again, depending on your solution for mobile devices, your phone is going to wipe after a certain amount of time. So I know some organizations have it 6, some organizations have it 10. The question is, it goes back to security awareness training. If you're going to do a 4-digit PIN, you got to make sure that PIN number is not your birthday. It's not your zip code. It's not your, your mailing address. And it's not your employee number. So again, it goes back to security awareness training. If everyone picked a PIN that was totally off the wall, we'd go with 4. And I think that really comes back to, like I said, security awareness training. If we can teach employees and everyone to randomly choose 4 digits, that's probably good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the information and, again, the data, that's what the attackers are after. The data we're trying to keep secure, and if we're making it easy for them to get to, then we're not doing our job.
I mean, it's very easy to get personal information for people. We've got you got LinkedIn, we got Facebook. Obviously I could find Tyler's anniversary date very easily. Is that his PIN number, his birthday? So it's things like that we're always using because we don't want to forget the PIN. So we use something we remember. But obviously, if it's something like that, it's very easily broken.
Yeah, absolutely. As we go through some of the rest of these, on this slide here, again, download apps from trusted stores. I'm sure a lot of you do this, but if you're in the Android world, make sure you're using the Google Play Store, and if you're in iOS, your only option there is the Apple App Store. As I mentioned before with mobile fragmentation, please, please, please keep your operating system and apps up to date. Again, they install security patches on here as they become aware of new and changing threats. So keep those things up to date, and it's just one simple step to keeping your smartphone or tablet more secure. This is an important one. I'm not sure that everybody does this, but after you complete a transaction or pay for something, make a purchase, make sure you log out of those websites or those apps before closing out. Again, just an added layer of security. Turning Wi-Fi off when not in use. Some people might say, I'm just going to leave it on and turn it off when I go to a public Wi-Fi location, such as a Starbucks, a Panera, or an airport. I wouldn't be too particular there, but again, it's just something you have to be aware of. Are you, allowing your phone to automatically connect to those networks, or are you making sure that your Wi-Fi is off when you're in those locations? Backing up your data might not be quite as essential for security, but it is extremely essential in the event you lose your phone, your phone gets destroyed. Again, the data is what we're trying to protect here, so you would at least have a backup that you could go back to so that the data could be restored. And again, this isn't necessarily applied to smartphones or tablets, but it could be applied across any platform. But avoid giving out your personal information, your social security number, your credit card number, all these different methods that attackers use via social engineering to try and get you to give that information up is extremely important to be aware of. So while you're on your phone or your tablet or your computer, avoid giving out any personal information. And now we're going to transition to some secure technologies, and Dave's going to go over some of these.
From an organization standpoint, you'll notice the top 3 are remote ways employees can connect. And they're probably not a surprise to anyone. Citrix. Citrix is, you'll have a Citrix farm in your organization, and the user will log in and securely see screenshots of that information. The actual application's actually running in on the servers, the organization, or a data site. And then a VPN, you would have, there's numerous different VPNs. A lot of times an organization will use Cisco VPN, or a smaller organization might use a Sonic Wall VPN or something that comes with their firewall. And then cloud-based, we're getting a lot more cloud-based applications, and that is just a server at someone else's location, and you're connecting to it. So those are 3 different ways, and all of them can be very secure if they're implemented correctly. And that's key to that. I mentioned MDM, Mobile Device Management Solutions. We'll get into that a little bit more, but it allows IT admins to manage smartphones and tablets from cloud or a local server on their network. So it's an easy way to manage. Now, if you have 5 devices, maybe you don't need an MDM solution. But if you have, several hundred users or 100 users, that might be an easy way to allow you to deploy software, access resources, track devices, remotely wipe devices, apply browsing policies, lock down those apps. So again, we'll get back into that a little bit more later on, but definitely something you should look into, and probably is going to be more prevalent in the future.
Yeah, I think for some medium to larger sized organizations, mobile device management solutions can be extremely beneficial just in the ability to centralize a lot of those security measures. But Dave, if you're a smaller sized organization, maybe you have 10 to 20 employees, maybe the IT director is also, juggling multiple roles. Is it easy to implement, let's say a VPN solution? So someone who maybe works remotely from a public Wi-Fi spot, again, like a Starbucks or maybe an airport, can be more secure. Is that easy to implement? Is that something that can be done quickly, or does that take some more time?
It's going to be easy to implement. You could have different, like I said, a firewall-based VPN, or you could have a software-based VPN, Microsoft. I think the key is, you can set up that secure VPN, but if you have some guy juggling a bunch and you don't have that, again, security awareness training, and that employee doesn't know what they're supposed to do, any of these secure solutions, there might be some risks.
Yeah. And so let's say somebody does connect to a public Wi-Fi, or something happens, or they don't use some of these secure technologies. Let's just go to the next slide and go over what are some of the risks with not doing that.
When I think of a security incident, I think of two different types, a data breach or a malware incident. Now, you could have a malware incident that is a data breach, but you could also have a malware incident that's not a data breach. So that's why they're listed separate there. Both are going to be very costly for the organization. Malware incident could be ransomware. May take your organization down for a couple days. If you don't have good backups, you may be put out of business. On the other hand, data breach, I don't know how you feel, but I definitely don't want to see our company name in the newspaper under data breach, because a lot of organizations just don't survive with that. Again, those data breaches you can read there: unsecured connections, lost or stolen mobile devices, unauthorized user, compromised devices connecting to the network. There's mitigating strategies to prevent data breach in all of these. And again, it takes two to tango, and it takes good IT policies, procedures, bring your own device policy, and it takes an employee that is willing to learn and take that responsibility of protecting the data, which is their livelihood and everyone's, at the organization's livelihood.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we look into even more of from the mobile or smartphone or tablet perspective, as we can see on this screen, I just kind of wanted to touch on the three most common mobile security breaches. And as Dave mentioned, a malware incident could be a security breach, but it also might not be. But again, it is included on this slide. But I'm a very practical person. I like to say, well, what does this actually mean? So let's say your device is lost or stolen. What does that mean? Well, you could rack up expensive international calls. The person who steals or accesses this device could make in-app purchases. If it's an Android, they could download a smartphone penetrating testing agent, which would, again, allow them to remotely control other devices on the Wi-Fi network that it connects to, which we'll touch on later. But again, those are very viable problems that exist. And again, going back to data, hopefully everyone joining this call is using a password manager to secure their passwords, and not, on their iPhone going into the notes section and going, hey, Target username, password, bank account username, password. You think about losing or getting that device stolen, all that person has to do is copy all that information, email it to themselves or text it to themselves, and then they have all of that and can do a lot of damage quickly. Looking at malware, if somebody gets malware on their mobile device, what does that mean? Again, they could spam your email contacts using a phishing campaign where somebody sees an email, it looks like it came from you, but it actually has a bad link. They could infect other devices around them, again, using these virus agents to do so. And also they could harvest passwords, another important reason to use secure password products. And then again, another very common security breach with smartphones and tablets is a rogue Wi-Fi network. So a lot of users have their phone set to automatically join a network whenever it comes into contact with that, especially you think about your work network or your home Wi-Fi. But even looking at airports or coffee shops or things like that, extremely important. This is more common, again, in Asia, which has a larger influx of Android products than in the US or in Europe, but something to be extremely aware of. So now I just want to go over, again, some more real-life examples of, I feel like even for me and maybe for some of you guys listening today, I hear about mobile security attacks or a breach, but I'm an iPhone user, so I feel like it's maybe not quite as prevalent for me, or maybe it doesn't apply to me. But I think it's important to be aware of some of the different things that could happen to us, and not to scare us, but to make us aware and to make us, understand our role in preventing some of these attacks from happening. So looking at mobile phishing and ransomware. So again, just like PC scams, there's bad guys out there. They're using social engineering, and they did it on PCs. Now they're doing it through mobile apps and through SMS text messages because they're trying to take advantage of human behavior. And basically what this trick does, it can then, it can download bad information onto that device. It can infect that device. It can lock that device down and trying to get a user to pay money to unlock it. Looking at using an infected device to attack other nearby devices. Again, this is a more extreme attack, but it is something that could happen. So just to give you guys an example, if somebody has an Android device and they're infected with a smartphone penetrating testing framework agent, this unsuspecting user, might think, oh, this is just a news app or an app on my phone, and they might not think anything about it, when in reality, this app or this agent has infected their complete device. And I just pulled up this quote from a penetration tester, which is a guy out there who's using these devices to test the security of other systems. And basically he said, if I have control of their mobile devices, I can go to the traditional route like stealing their contacts or sending text messages to a premium number. But I also have the ability through a Wi-Fi network to attack additional systems on that network from the infected phone. Whether I'm connected to their home Wi-Fi, their work Wi-Fi, or even at Starbucks, I can exploit those vulnerabilities and then take advantages of the infected device. So this is, again, something to be aware of. Maybe not quite as common for an iOS user or an Apple user, but something to keep track of. Looking at cross-platform banking attacks, basically what this is an attacker is able to gain access to a PC. So they're on the computer, they see when the user goes to log into the bank, and they intercept that request, and then they send them an email or a text saying, hey, download this app so that we can be more secure. The user unknowingly does that, and then the attacker has access both to the personal computer and the mobile device. And finally, cryptocurrency mining attacks is basically, it's a malware that infiltrates an Android device in search of digital currencies like Bitcoin. So again, just trying to make some money. And then lastly, I included phishing phone calls. I'm sure many of you are aware of, hey, this is the IRS. You owe $2,000. If you don't pay now, we're going to come arrest you. So trying to use scare tactics into getting people to, give up money without something that they never even did. So yeah, with that, we are going to now transition into more of the organizational perspective of mobile technology and how a mobile strategy can help your organization.
Mobility is truly driving IT change. I mean, I think no one would argue that fact. Most organizations that don't have a BYOD policy, I think over the last couple of years have really seen these devices creeping into their organization and network. Anytime, anywhere, any device access is now standard. What does your BYOD policy say about that? How are you going to secure those devices? Again, we talk about the BYOD policy, but we don't actually give you a policy in this webinar. But it could be a comprehensive policy that will have like a MDM solution that will provide encryption We'll provide standard apps, etc. Heightened importance of social business interactions. I know my clients more and more. We deal with social applications. Whether I'm texting them, whether it's Twitter, whether So it's expected now. So how do we make that work in regards to our security? And again, we have to take into consideration different departments when we're making these policies: legal, security, finance, HR. Important to take that into consideration to make sure that the plan is comprehensive.
Yeah, I think that's a point that can often get overlooked, Dave, especially from the organizational perspective. Let's say you're a janitor. You say, well, what do I have to do with, being aware of the mobile security policy or being aware of a security policy in general? Well, what happens if an attacker comes to your office and says, hey, I just need to go to the bathroom, and the janitor is the one who encounters him and lets him in? I think it's important that all areas across the organization are aware of kind of this changing landscape, where while that person said they were going to the bathroom, the janitor left them go, and now they've gone in and they've plugged in to a port on your network and they're connected, or they installed a device and now they have connection to your Wi-Fi network. So I think it's just important to be aware that this is, even if you're joining this call or if you feel like you might not have a specific role in creating this plan or igniting this plan within your organization, we all factor into these considerations, and we all have a role in being mobily and obviously cyber secure in general.
That's a good point, Tyler. I mean, I think we found out pretty clearly that we have to make sure that employees receive that security awareness quickly. We may have interns, we may have new employees come in, and that's got to be the first day of training. Hey, this is our security approach. This is what's expected of you, and you have to have a little teeth on that. If they make a wrong decision, there's got to be consequences. So it's important, and like you said, from the janitor up, some of these devices, if you get them in the network, inside the organization, they'll phone out and open a connection, and all of a sudden you have a data breach, and all that comes with that.
Yeah, and just to interrupt you there for a second, Dave, I see you guys submitting some questions, and thank you for doing that. Everyone else, feel free if you do have any questions to submit them. But for the three of you who submitted them recently, we are going to go over those within the presentation. So if you can just stay tuned, we will touch on those in just a few minutes.
Mobile security and management. I think we can all agree keeping data safe is a top priority. I always tell people at McConnell & Asbury, without security, McConnell & Asbury ceases to exist. We need that data security. I mean, protecting our clients' data is our priority. Jumping again to a sort of different topic, but employee-owned mobile devices. How are you dealing with them? How are you adapting to them? Who owns the data on those devices? Can you wipe those devices? What happens when the employee leaves? There's a lot more data now that's other places. Is it always encrypted? Do you have policies that say, hey, any data that leaves the organization needs to be encrypted? Maybe you have a policy that says all data needs to be encrypted, both anywhere. Mm-hmm. But again, we have to understand what those risks are, and if we choose to accept those risks, great. But if not, at least we know what they are and we can start to mitigate them.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about having an actual mobile security document or a security policy in general, it's important to revisit it on an annual, semi-annual basis or something. As we touched on, this technology environment's constantly changing, so we need to be aware, as you said, of what devices are coming in, but not having a document or a policy that says users can't bring a landline phone in. Obviously, that's never been a security concern, but 5 to 10 years from now, who knows what smartphones are going to look like? The Apple Watch industry and the smart watch industry, how is that going to evolve? Wearable technology. So staying on top of that and updating your document in a timely manner is also important.
Mobile strategy. I look at this sort of as a risk assessment. You're understanding your current state, your strategic direction. Understand your inventory, what you have to protect, what data you have to protect. You're understanding your user profiles. Users in manufacturing or engineering or finance are going to be different requirements, and you're going to have to secure them differently. And once you understand how you're securing those people, what you're securing, then you can analyze the gaps of how it should be secured. So you're going to have a gap most of the time between how it's being secured now and what you think it should be secured, best practices. So you're analyzing those gaps, you're mitigating for the differences by defining recommendations, solutions, and you're building a roadmap to get to that final product. And so that's basically your mobile strategy. Some key areas to address when you're doing that is what mobile devices are your users using? How are you going to support them? How many devices? Do you have compliance requirements? Is your organization's Wi-Fi secure and robust enough for additional users? We could have 100 different questions there with the key areas you need to address, but that's just some of them. But it's a start.
Yeah, and Dave, let's just say, maybe you're part of an organization where there's 10 to 20 individuals and you don't have any sort of mobile security policy or security policy, again, in general in place. How would you, or what areas would you start with? Again, you just talked about analyzing the gaps of where you want to be and where you're currently at. So thinking about where an organization is currently at, again, could be somewhat vague because we don't know the specifics of the organization, but what are the one or two areas that you think might be the most important to start with?
Well, in order to protect something, you have to know what it is. And if you don't know what it is, it's hard to protect something. That's just the bottom line. So I would start with what data do I have to protect? And then you're going to move into what assets you have, et cetera. But you really have to understand the data that you're going to protect and why you're protecting it, and then go from there. Bring your own device policy. We've talked about this several times throughout this presentation. What are you trying to achieve? Obviously, we're trying to make mobile users secure. We're not trying to beat down the mobile user. We're trying to make sure that the mobile user has a job in the future. We're making sure that data is there. Define, document, publish your bring your own device policy. Every employee has to know, right? If an employee asks you, do we have one? Then you probably didn't publish it well enough. And you need input. We've talked about this before too. You need input from different departments to make sure that's a comprehensive plan. And then entitlement. There's some organizations out there that are taking the standpoint, hey, we're going to give smartphones to every employee, and therefore we can closely monitor those. We can control the apps that are on there. We can remotely wipe it, et cetera. So we have a lot more control. Other people are saying, hey, senior managers or managers and above should get phones, and this is how it's going to be, but that should be documented well.
Yeah, and as you guys obviously saw there on the screen, we did have a poll question just to ask you guys whether or not you did have a BYOD policy within your organization. So I think that's great that 52% of you said that you do, and then 32% said no. So again, it might be important to find out whether you do have one and it's not documented or published correctly, because that, again, could be the problem with some of you who said you were unsure. But again, as Dave touched on, it's extremely important to be able to cover this from a security standpoint, to be aware of what devices are allowed or are connecting to your work network.
MDM solutions. I listed two here because I'm familiar with them, AirWatch by VMware and Citrix Zen Mobile. There's a ton out there. You got to do your research and see which one fits best for your organization. Good time to say there's no perfect fit nor no security perfect outline for every organization. Every organization is going to be different. So something that works for McConnelly and Asbury or works for another organization may not work for you. You got to identify the risks, what data you're securing, et cetera. So again, an MDM solution will allow admins to deploy software, enable access to resources, track devices, remotely wipe devices, apply browsing policies, and a lot more. So, I know Tyler worked a lot with Verizon and being able to wipe devices and stuff like that. So you can do different things with a non-MDM solution, but this is a lot more comprehensive. You can go to one source and sort of see all your devices and control them.
Yeah, I mean, the centralized security of mobile device management solutions is really outstanding. If you work in IT or in any type of security role or have any influence in that in your organization, and you have the ability to afford that, I would highly recommend it. Just, again, as Dave said, the ability, it's almost like a remote firewall. You can control what comes into that device, what that device is allowed to access, and again, just a centralized, secure way of managing all of those remote and mobile devices that are part of your network.
I think an MDM device also benefits the mobile workforce, the worker. Productivity is enhanced, apps are streamlined, user satisfaction is increased. There's not these glitches here. Employees know what devices are supported, and it's easier for the user. I mean, the user wants to work remotely, most users, and this makes it easier for them, and it makes it easier for IT to securely manage them. Dual-factor authentication. Hopefully everyone out there is doing dual-factor authentication. Dual-factor authentication could be with your smartphone, could be with a key or a token. But what it does is if your password is compromised, if there's a phishing scheme and say a quarter of your employees give out their passwords, that dual factor is going to prevent that attacker from using that password to come back in. So that dual factor could be on your mobile phone, it could be on your VPN, it could be on, say, Office 365, it could be on Citrix, it could be on your routers, your firewalls. It just allows another layer of defense. If someone knows your password, they can't get in. I know the FBI came out with a statement that all organizations should be using dual factor.
Yeah,
and it's not a real expensive solution, but it's something that's definitely worth doing for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely worth doing. And this, again, can take several different roles, as you see on the screen there. It just incorporates multiple ways to authenticate that you are who you say you are. So it takes something like a username or a password, and then it will verify via something you have or something you are. So you can kind of see the examples of what it actually might be. But again, as Dave said, they're usually not overly expensive to deploy within an organization. And the phrase there on the bottom, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, is somewhat cheesy, but it can absolutely reign true with dual factor authentication and a data breach. Spending a little bit of money to implement dual factor versus having your organization be down for a few days or a week or even long term because you didn't implement something like this and a username password was compromised, would be extremely detrimental to that organization.
For users out there that probably most of you have, but for users out there that have had a penetration test, a third-party penetration test done against your organization, it's very easy for them to get passwords these days with different social engineering campaigns. So it's extremely important, and this is one of the mitigating factors for that. So on this screen, there's two that I'm very familiar with. Duo works on a smartphone, works great with multiple applications. And what the user will do, they'll log in. It authenticates first with your Active Directory on your Microsoft, and then it automatically goes into your phone. And if you hit approve, you'll go through. If not, you won't get access. So it's a great way to prevent an attacker from getting your password and getting in.
Yeah, and Dave and I are obviously familiar with Duo, but there are solutions out there even through Duo where if you don't have a smartphone or if you have really poor cell reception wherever you might be at and are trying to authenticate from, where there's still ways around that via a token, via a phone call, or even having different security codes within an SMS text message that you're then required to input on the website. So a couple different solutions there in ways around just the smartphone push notification.
And quickly on security awareness, we've actually obviously talked about this all through the presentation, but it's important to make sure that you don't have a false sense of security. How do you know your employees aren't going to click on things? Are you phishing your employees? You need to be phishing your employees actively, and they need to be not stock emails. They need to be emails that say, hey, this is John Doe, the CEO, and I want you to do this. Click on this link. Are they going to click on that link? And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But do you know unless you don't know unless you're going to phish them? So there's definitely some great phishing applications out there that allow you to phish your employees, and that should be worked into your security awareness training. Security awareness training should be done at least annually, if not more. And is extremely important. It takes two to tango. If your employees aren't secure, and your organization won't be secure. And training your employees to be secure at work means they're going to be secure at home. So it's a benefit both ways. You're not going to have an employee that is secure at work and not secure at home. It's a learned practice, and we have to clearly define what that is and make it a sort of a style of life, or a life change.
Yeah, it absolutely is a style of life, and I think that's, again, going back to the objective of today's webinar. We wanted you guys to be aware of, again, the threats, the ways to avoid them, the technologies that are out there, but probably the biggest component for Dave and I is just stressing that you guys are a major factor. Employees are a major factor. The human approach is again where a lot of this goes wrong. So we're trying to make people more aware, trying to make them better understand what is out there and how to avoid it.
I think IT people really feel comfortable with hardware, software, because it reacts the same way each time. We've got firewalls, and we put a rule in there and it works. We have an employee that ate something funny for lunch, and he clicks on something funny after lunch. I can't control it. Like, how do you control it? It's very frustrating. So you just have to work with that security awareness to make sure that people are understanding the risks, and they understand how to mitigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up today's presentation, again, I'm a big believer in practical examples. So in case you haven't seen something like this before, that's great. But here is an example of what it might look like, again, on a smartphone or a tablet device. So as a user, you get this pop-up first let's just look at the one on the left side. You get this pop-up that says, hey, you've got to contact support immediately because a third-party application has crashed your operating system. Well, a few of the easy warning signs to me. The first is the URL, i-phone-support.com. Seems extremely fishy. Obviously, I know Apple owns the domain apple.com, so I would have expected it to be something around that. So that's kind of the first obvious clue. But then if you look at some of the things in there, there's a spelling error. It says, due to a third-party application in your phone, there's no space in between your and phone. And then you look at a number. Why would Apple require you to contact them immediately if iOS crashed? Certainly Apple has its maintenance and repair standards and obviously organizational schedule set out where you can go onto their website, you can fill out a form, you can do all that. So this clearly is a phishing attempt to get you to call a number to try and pay them some money or install something on your device. Looking at the one on the right, again, the securityofphone.com, very unusual domain. Something that we've started to see more and more is, if you look in the kind of the third paragraph there, it says, if the problem cannot be resolved immediately, the virus will spy your phone and destroy your SIM card, delete all your contacts. So they're, again, using a scare tactic to think that your SIM card is going to be destroyed and your contacts are going to be deleted. Clearly not going to happen, but again, just trying to get you to rush into acting quickly. As you can see on the far right one, 2 minutes and 45 seconds, your phone has a serious virus. Clearly trying to get you to rush and act quickly and go through this.
That's perfect, Tyler. When an attacker attacks, they're going to attack on a Friday night when you don't want to bother the IT person, and they're going to make it seem like a rush. Hey, you need to do this for me right away. And then on Sunday, they're going to hit you again, or Saturday, they're going to hit you again, and they want you to feel like it's a rush. Well, nothing's a rush. The house isn't burning down. The organization isn't burning down. If you really want to contact the person, call them. But it can wait to Monday. There's not a rush. So I think when it comes to security, there's no rush in security. So just remember that.
Yeah. Patience is definitely a virtue when it comes to looking at an email that is, arousing a lot of emotion in you, whether it be anger or panic.
You're definitely not going to lose your job if you wait, but you possibly could end the organization if you rush.
Yeah. And again, I know we're running short on time here, so we're going to try and get through these last few slides pretty quickly, but this was one of the questions that came in, is how do I know if my device is infected? Again, you can see on the screen some of the common ways to truly know. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said truly know, because it actually is very difficult to truly know, but these might give you an insight into a possible infection of your device. The one that I'll point out, poor battery life. Let's make sure that's not related to your phone being old, or you're running the GPS and streaming music while your phone is sitting in the car, in 95-degree weather. Again, that also goes to device getting exceptionally hot for no reason. Obviously, we want to make sure that this is just happening completely out of the blue. Some of the ones that could absolutely point to malware, ransomware, or some type of infection is applications opening and closing on their own without you doing anything. If you just see an app that looks funny and you never downloaded it, but you just see it on your phone, or if you see phone calls that were made from your phone that you did not make. So again, this is not an end-all, catch-all type of list, but is certainly a few easy examples to understand of whether or not your device is infected. Let's say your device is lost or if it's stolen. Now what do you do? Well, the first thing I would say is make sure you can't find it. Make sure it's not just hiding under the couch or lost somewhere else inside your house. And again, you can use certainly iCloud, Find My iPhone, and other different remote solutions, or even if you utilize an MDM solution within your organization, you would most likely be able to use that to try and find out the physical location of your phone. But if it is stolen, or even, again, if it is lost, it's important to notify your organization's IT department, and then it would be important to wipe your phone remotely, again, via a couple different remote solutions, so that anyone who did steal or take your phone is not able to access any of the data on there. And I put that fourth point in just as a possible solution. Some people might think that's ridiculous, but if you think about these devices, they cost several $100s. They obviously could contain credit card information, social security number. They contain a lot of pertinent information, personally identifiable information. So if you know for sure it was absolutely stolen, then it doesn't hurt to contact law enforcement. All right, and just looking at some simple steps to mobile security. Again, not going to go over everything here, but physical security is extremely important when you're thinking about smartphones and tablets, but even, again, laptops. Where is your device? Where is it at? Are you aware of that? Because if you're not, it could have been lost or it could have been stolen. Using strong passwords, as Dave touched on before, you can use a longer PIN. Nowadays, you can use an alphanumeric code, which is a combination of numbers and letters, and I wouldn't just use first name, last name, 1 as your alphanumeric code, but something that's meaningful to you that you could maybe mix in numbers and letters and make it even more secure than just a 4 or 6-digit PIN. Again, password managers, some of the ones that I would recommend, LastPass is one I've used a lot, and I highly recommend as a password manager that you can use on your desktop and your phone. You can use it as an application. I use it just the desktop version, but then if I need to access any of that information for anything on my phone, I get a computer and log on that way. But other password managers include Keeper, Dashlane, 1Password, and TrueKey. Certainly, if there's any of these you're interested in, you can ask us about them, but even doing a quick Google search and going to a reputable website that reviews some of these would be helpful. Anti-malware solutions, so maybe a little bit more applicable to our Android users, but using an antivirus app that will constantly scan your phone is important. And yeah, you guys can see all the other ones on there, and certainly you have access to the slides if you want to look at these again. But looking at the second to last one, social engineering. Be careful when you're opening your device. As Dave said, on a Friday night when you get an email or a text that says you're going to be arrested if you don't do X, Y, or Z immediately. Take a second, have some patience, think about it. For what I like to tell a lot of my friends and family is think about what the text or the email is actually saying. I've heard of a scam where, hey, you didn't pay your PP&L bill and we're going to shut off your electric. Well, if you paid your PP&L bill, and if you've had no other notification that there's been anything wrong, why would you even worry about an email like that? So those were some of the simple steps just to being more mobilely secure in today's society. So again, we are running a little bit behind on time, so I apologize for that. It looks like we were able to go through most of the questions that come in. Let me just kind of go through some of those pretty quickly here. Yeah, looks good. Dave, do you have any final thoughts on mobile security in today's society for our users?
I think it comes down to IT organizations have to work with employees, security awareness, and then they have to have the right products and security and hardware, software in the organization correctly installed. So, leaving out one of those pieces is going to really harm the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dave, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Appreciate your insight, especially from the organizational perspective and understanding how employees and organizations can stay secure in a mobile environment. So with that, we're going to end today's webinar. As you guys can see, our emails are on there. So if there are questions we weren't able to get to, or if you think of anything after today's webinar, feel free to contact us and reach out to us. We'd be happy to get back to you. Thank you once again for joining us for this presentation produced by McConley and Asbury. We hope you join us for our upcoming events. You can stay up to date with news and learn more about our upcoming events by visiting us at www.macpas.com. Thanks again and have a great day.